Hello and welcome back to Verbal Money. This podcast is not afraid to deal with the big questions like just who told Mark Casey that he'd won that fight 30-27. Can't work that one out. But we should say as well, love Mark Casey. It was gutted to see him lose, but that video on Twitter did make me laugh when I saw it. We got a lot to dive into. We don't have Steve with us for this episode. I think he's been loosely associated with James Krause, so we can't have him on the podcast. So he's not here, but hopefully that all gets cleared up. We should probably start by talking about one because it was the first events of the weekend. They closed out their year with back-to-back events in Manila, one on Prime Video 5 and 1164, which turned out to be pretty successful events for them. Some really good fights on there. The main event for one on Prime Video 5 was always going to be the big talking point with the undefeated champions, but that knockout from Anatoly Malakin over Renier de Ridder, I did not see coming. It was tough to watch because we've never seen Renier de Ridder in that kind of situation before. We've never really seen him be tested. So to see him get stopped in that fashion was like, it didn't feel real. It felt quite strange to watch. I don't know if that's just me.
Yeah, I mean, it's to see him getting it poured on him like he was for. It was a good couple of minutes that he was kind of taking that barrage of strokes. It's a weird one, isn't it? Because recently, especially this year, we've been speaking about champions and kind of just looking past what their current situation is. Like we did it with Usman. Well, not us specifically, but a lot of people did it with Usman when he was fighting Edwards. It was kind of like he was on about moving up to light heavyweight. And I don't mean to just bring this back to the UFC, but it's a similar situation of we kind of look past things sometimes in MMA. And I think in situations like this, it kind of brings us back that anyone can beat anyone. And obviously Malakin is a very, very good fighter. So it's not as if he's just been beaten by nobody.
Yeah. And
I do.
No, you go.
I was just going to say, I do quite like the comparison between Usman and Edwards and this fight with Malakin and de Ridder, because you've got two very dominant champions and a very respectable challenger, but just kind of a challenger that a lot of people were overlooking because of how dominant the champion was. And just as Jamie said, it goes to prove that anyone could beat anyone on any given night in the sport.
Yeah, hopefully for Renier de Ridder, I don't think he loses too much stock in losing for the first time, because the consensus is that he could just go back to middleweight and dominate that division for as long as he wants. You know, he's taking a big risk by fighting a heavyweight, light heavyweight. So, but yeah, strange to watch. Kate Brutolo defended his world title, which I think most of us expected to happen anyway. Gutted for Roberto Soldic's debut. So disappointing to see that end with a groin strike in the first round. Just as it seemed like maybe the nerves were starting to disappear for both guys, that happens, and we'll have to wait to see Soldic properly back in there, which is a bit disappointing. And then 1164 as well, kind of like two big headlines coming out of that one with Jared Brooks's title-winning performance against Joshua Pasio, who was a bit of a strange fight that Brooks dominated, which I've got to give Jake credit for this. I completely forgot that Jared Brooks was the guy that knocked himself out when he tried that like flip takedown in the UFC. I completely forgot that was the same guy, which feels weird now watching him in one where he's just dominated the strawweight division, like completely, and now wants to fight DJ. It's like, wait, that's the same guy. Like,
yeah,
it's bizarre. And then Brandon Vera retired, which again, big deal for one, and especially in Manila, like for him to get that reception was pretty cool. And then we got some really big one news just a few hours ago that Demetrius Johnson's going to face Adriano Moraes again for the third time. But the big deal is that it's their first event in the US, in Columbus. How do you guys feel about one coming to the US? And do you think it's going to be successful for them?
I think so, yeah. Paired with the Amazon Prime deal, I think it is a really, I mean, it's a move that you kind of expected, isn't it? And to have someone like DJ like headlining that and being the face of that, I think it's perfect. Like you couldn't hope for anyone better to be the one that's at the top of the card.
An absolutely awesome fight as well. Absolutely awesome. The first two were absolute crackers, especially the second one. The second one was amazing. I know a lot of people kind of overlook how good that fight was just because of how amazing the finish was from DJ. But Moraes he's the real deal. Like, I know he lost the second fight, but Jesus Christ, he is as legit as they come. And I expect the third fight to be an absolute barn burner. It's really good to see one now expanding out to the US, because I think they can have a couple of big events there with their big Western stars. So yeah, very excited for that.
Yeah, the only thing I was a bit like, oh, is that it's in May, which feels so far away. So I guess we'll talk about that in like 4 months or something. Like, it feels a bit weird to be talking about it so far in advance, right? But like, they've gone early, I guess. Why not? We spoke about the UFC Fight Night card on the last episode, and we were talking about how it, some really good matchups on there. And I would say it delivered. At least the main card, all finishes, plenty of talking points in there. The main event in particular was incredible between Stephen Thompson and Kevin Holland. What a performance from Wonderboy, which was a strange thing when I watched it. I originally was going to come into this podcast and say, have we been sleeping on Wonderboy? But I don't think anyone particularly has. It's just we've seen him lose to some grapplers lately. So maybe we just needed to be reminded just how good at striking he is, which we got that.
Yeah. The thing that frustrated me the most is, obviously Kevin Holland came into this fight saying that he wasn't going to wrestle at all. There was situations at least 2 or 3 times where he had top control. Even if it was they just fell onto the ground, it was just a trip from both of them and he ended up on top. Why did he stand straight back up? Like, you're fighting Wonderboy. What? Okay, yeah, we get that you want to have a fight. You want to have a standing affair. Like, fair enough. You want to give the fans a good fight. If you're in a situation where you've got Wonderboy on the ground and his back is on the floor, take advantage of it. Don't stand it back up. Like, I don't know. It's just frustrating. I don't know why he didn't take advantage of those positions.
Yeah, Kevin Holland is I love watching Kevin Holland, but he can be frustrating at times.
Yeah.
It's like, I always think of was it the Derek Brunson fight where he just didn't really seem to offer anything. He seemed quite happy with staying on his back and trash talking. And I mean, this fight was a lot better than that fight. So I'm not too annoyed at him, but it did seem, especially when the hand injury came into play.
Exactly.
Those takedowns could have been so useful for him, but we'll never know.
He probably would have made it to the scorecard. You've got to think, and then if you add in the fact that he might have been out of control for a significant amount of time on the ground, we could have been like speaking about something completely different now. But the fact that his selfishness, and not selfishness because he wanted to give the fans a great fight, which is fair, his stubbornness to just not exploit that part of Wonderboy's game. I don't know. Just, I'm glad that we got a great fight, obviously, but from a perspective of Kevin Holland, why wouldn't you utilize that advantage you had?
Yeah. What do we feel about Wonderboy at this point in his career? Because all I've seen on Twitter since is people saying, let's just not have him fight grapplers anymore. Which, don't get me wrong, I'd probably be okay with that. But also, it feels a bit weird that he's in a place where people love watching him, but only if he's in certain fights. You know what I mean? Like, that's not really a good place for him to be in his career, where it's like, okay, he's great, but let's just not match him with people who have an opposite game plan to him. Like,
exactly, you can't. There's times where obviously matchups kind of just suit each other, but we can't just be completely favourable to Wonderboy, especially as he is holding up quite a. I'm not sure what rank he is at the moment, but he's top 8, isn't he? So it's going to come to a point where there's going to be, if there's a grappler just below him, we can't not give him a grappler because we like to see him against strikers. It's a catch-22, isn't it? Like, we don't want to see him get out grappled, but we want to see him fighting strikers for those really exciting fights.
Yeah. It's a very difficult point in a fighter's career where they get to this protected legend status where we don't want to see him fight these really difficult matchups. Like, they were talking about him versus Shavkat earlier this year, and everyone was like, that's nearly abuse. Like, that's a horrible, horrible fight. And it's because Wonderboy is so revered by the fans. He's a really beloved figure. And, when he's not fighting grapplers, he always puts on really entertaining fights as well. And, the fight of the weekend is evidence to that. So if he's adamant that he wants to go on a title run, then I suppose he's going to have to fight a couple of grapplers. He's at number 6 in the world right now, and he's fought the majority of guys in front of him, and a lot of guys ranked below him as well. So I suppose if he just kind of wants to ride out the rest of his career, I'm pretty sure he's like 39 years old now. So if he just wants to get to, his early 40s, have a couple of fun fights, that's fine. I don't have an issue with that. It's just that him being number 6 in the world, and if he wants to go on another serious title run, we can't protect him from matchups.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said at the start, ton of really good finishes on the main card. What was the ones that caught your guys' attention the most?
I think Pavlovich, the knockout it was under a minute, wasn't it? It's Andy Hickey put a stat up on Twitter, which, his account's great if you don't follow him. I think it was an actual UFC stat on their page. It was the most knockdowns. Or was it? What was it? I'm trying to pull up his stat here, and I'm being an idiot because I can't remember it. What exactly it was. I think it was something to do with knockdowns. Sub 1 minute, and Pavlovich was top by like 2 or 3 per 15 minutes, and it was like he's genuinely terrifying. He's absolutely terrifying.
Just on that point, I think I don't know if they both came from Andy, who's a great guy, by the way. Go follow him if you're not doing it already. But I'm not sure if it was him, but I saw one from him earlier on, or I think it might have been last night. It's the list of all the sub 60-second knockouts or finishes from this year, and Pavlovich is the only guy who makes it on the list twice. He's outside the top 10 like fastest finishes. His finishes came in I think 55 and 50 56 seconds each, which is insane, by the way. But he's the only guy who's fought twice he's fought 3 times this year, and he's got 2 knockouts in under a minute. That's unreal. And then
the guys he's doing it against as well, sorry. Like, he's not doing it against like unranked opponents. He's doing it against the top ranked opponents,
and really heavy hitters as well. Like he's putting himself in the firing line for that. The other stat I saw was knockdowns per 15 minutes. I think number 2 is something like 5.4.
That's the one that I was on about.
Yeah, he's up at something like 6.8,
6.7 or something. Yeah, that's exactly what I was on.
That's like nearly 7 knockdowns in every 15 minutes. Are you for real? Like, I don't understand how people get up after getting hit by him, honestly. He's absolutely unreal. The only other finish that really comes to mind that really stood out was Delidze. I was not expecting him to win that fight because I knew he was good. I just didn't think he was, top 10 good, or he was unproven. And he was, in the most respectful way possible, kind of getting the shit kicked out of him for the first 2 rounds. It looked like he didn't quite have enough to hang with Hermanson, and then he pulls out a calf slicer from bottom position, rolls Hermanson up like a fucking tennis ball, gets on his back, and starts raining down punches from there. Just awesome finish, awesome sequence, and I'm interested now in seeing how far he can go at middleweight.
Yeah, that was an impressive one for sure. Like you said, I didn't see it coming after seeing the first round play out. I was like, Hermanson just got too much for him. So to pull that off in the way he did was unbelievable. There was there was good finishes all over the main card. I mean, pretty much we spoke about RDA versus Brian Barberena for about 2 minutes at most on the last episode, and I think we pretty much summed up the fight that Brian Barberena is a really fun fighter. Watching him fight legends is really fun, but RDA is not at the point in his career yet where he just brawls with people. He's just too technical still at this point. And then Mateus Nicolau defeating Matt Schnell, which the performance from Nicolau was incredible. I thought just looked so switched on. Like once he found his timing in the first round, it was just not looking good for Matt Schnell, which another top flyweight contender who is just a nightmare matchup for those guys. Like,
yeah, he really is. I mean, just quickly going back to who were you on about just before?
RDA.
RDA, sorry, yeah. I'd love to see the McGregor fight finally come to fruition. Like, it just seems like that makes the most sense for both parties now. Obviously, McGregor wants to come back at 170. They've already got a history. You don't need to sell that fight. Not that you need to sell a McGregor fight as it is anyway. But that just makes a whole lot of sense to me. And I don't know whether that's just me being like trying to give RDA a really nice payday. Not that he needs it, but it just makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I don't really know how I feel about it.
No,
I'm not opposed to it, but I don't see it happening for him.
I don't see it happening, but I think it does make a hell of a lot of sense.
Yeah,
I think it does make a lot of sense, and especially the RDA is not ranked at welterweight, so it's not like we're throwing McGregor into a top 10 matchup. He wins, he gets to call for a title shot, even though he probably would fucking get one anyway. But I was saying on Sunday when I was watching the fights, it's like it really depends on where RDA wants to go from here. If he wants to stick at 170, that McGregor fight makes all the sense in the world, because if you've seen the pictures of McGregor in the fucking nightclubs lately, he looks like Hulk Hogan going around. It's just, he's not getting back down to 155 anytime soon. It'll be a struggle to get back down to 170. So I think the RDA fight makes a lot of sense. And it doesn't, it's just a fun fight. It's a fun fight. And yeah, probably happening about 6 or 7 years too late from when it should have happened. But it's a lot of fun. And like you were saying, Jamie, it's not like RDA exactly needs the payday. But
No.
I bet he's not going to fucking complain about it.
I've seen a lot of people saying about Thompson and McGregor fighting, but that's completely like out of the realms of possible. I mean, it's possible, obviously, but I don't see that happening one bit. Like, compared to RDA McGregor, I think that's more likely to happen.
See, if you throw McGregor in there with Wonderboy, like we were saying earlier, Wonderboy is at that number 6 position. If he wants to just take fun fights, his ranking kind of compromises that, because anyone who beats him is now nearly a top 5 contender. And we all know that if McGregor goes in, beats nearly 40-year-old Wonderboy, he's going to be mounting off for a title shot straight away.
I think he will, no matter who he fights, though. I think he will anyway.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah, probably. So we have a really big UFC card coming up this weekend, the final pay-per-view of the year. But before that, we've got Bellator on Friday night with the semi-finals of the Bantamweight Grand Prix, which has been maybe the best thing that Bellator have put on so far this year. They've had a couple of fighters really emerge as stars for their roster, which you can see in the main event with Rafion Stotts and Danny Sabatello, which competing for the interim championship is one of the best fights Bellator have put on this year for sure. And two guys that I think have become such big personalities through this tournament. Obviously you've got the other matchup on there, which is also great between Magomedov and Patchy Mix. So just a bit excited for this card. I say this card. I'm excited for those two fights. There's not that much, else to dive into, but
they know full well that those two fights are going to carry the card as far as it needs to be carried. Stotts and Sabatello have done an absolutely ridiculous job of selling this fight, to the point where if it was just that fight on its own and they were just showing that fight on its own, they'd probably still get the same amount of views that they would if it was a full card. Like them two have just they've done phenomenally at selling this fight.
It's great to see as well, because Bellator doesn't particularly get a lot of fan or media attention a lot of the time, but those two, they've just gone on this fucking media blitz of shouting and hurling insults at one another, and I'm fucking here for it. Like, I want to watch this fight. It's that, like, I know we always come back to when we talk about Bellator. Bellator just don't promote their events, do they? Like, this is the first Bellator card in a while that I've genuinely wanted to watch, because the two guys in the main event they have really sold it for me. So I know Josh Thompson, I know I'm meant to be selling the fight as a part of the media, but the fighters have done it for me.
Yeah, that's how I feel as well. This is the first Bellator event in quite a while where I've known when it's going to be, purely because of Stotts and Sabatello. Like, I'm so excited to watch those two guys. And then, it's a Bellator card. There's a Liz Carmouche title fight in there as well, which I don't have anything to say about.
Is there actually? Actually?
Flyweight championship on the line, Liz Carmouche versus Juliana Velasquez.
Oh, that's a rematch, I think. They fought, I'm not sure if it was this year or if it was last year, but I'm pretty sure they fought, and it was a fucking atrocious stoppage from what I can remember.
Yes, or at least this is a straight rematch, yeah.
Or at least people said it was, what the MMA community is.
Yeah.
It could have been absolutely fair for all I know. But again, like, Mix and Magomedov, that's an awesome fight as well. Like, really, are we really going to throw in one more title fight just for the sake of it?
Yeah, I'm a little bit annoyed that there's a title fight on the Liz Carmouche fight, so that there'll be that in between Mix and Magomedov.
Yeah.
So I can't just wake up and watch those two.
Oh.
That's going to be tough. But
That's actually put me off watching this event now. I was hoping they were going to pull a little like UFC 200 job when they were just like going to mix and match some title fights on the main card, throw in a couple of fun fights in the middle. For fuck's sake. That's nearly deterred me from watching. No disrespect to Velasquez or Carmouche, you're two absolutely phenomenal fighters, but
Bellator gonna Bellator, man. There's nothing we can do about that.
We said the very same thing last week complaining about Bellator.
Well, yeah, I mean they've not even kind of promoted this themselves. It's the fighters that have done it for them this time around. We're giving them credit when it's not even their promotion of it. It's the fighters that have done it themselves. But
they didn't even make the matchup. Like it made itself.
No, it just happened. But oh well, we'll be the beneficiaries of it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first time this is the first time I've probably ever said this, and it's the first time I'll say it in quite a while. I think I'm more excited for the Bellator main event than I am the UFC main event this weekend, which is strange to say, especially considering this was supposed to be UFC 282, the rematch between Yuri Prohaska and Glover Teixeira, which I was so excited for. And then a couple of weeks ago, it all falls off.
I was just about to ask you, would you still be feeling that way if we still had the original main event?
No.
Thought so.
That original main event, it was, I don't know, man. It was like their first fight was incredible. That it was just, I mean, it might not have gone the same way, and I don't think it would have, but just that first one alone, that sold it, and it was like that was the whole drive across this fight. Now that it's like an interim fight for me. I can't get that heavily interested with interim title fights, and to me, this feels like it's an interim title fight. I know that's not Jiri's fault. He got injured. That's how it is. That's how the game works. But I just don't know.
Yeah, it's definitely made worse by the fact that we could have had the rematch on this card. So the fact that now there's a title fight for Yuri's belt, and Yuri was supposed to be on this card. It's not like he got injured.
We were still getting this fight as well, though. Like we still had this fight, even though it was only a 3-round fight. We still had this fight to look forward to, and then we were getting another incredible fight on top of that. I think losing that one's just been like a bit of a kick in the teeth. And for me, I said at the time, I feel as if Glover should have been in that main event. I think I don't know whether we even see him fight for a title at this point again.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the opportunity might have gone for him, which is devastating if true. For some reason with this main event, I look at it on paper and I'm like, Magomed Ankalaev is absolutely incredible. How does he deal with the power of Jan Blachowicz? I'm like, this should get me excited, but it feels like a fight night headliner that now has a title fight on it to me. Like, I can't get rid of that feeling because the rest of the card is really good. Like, we've spoken about this before recording anyway, but like, I am more excited for the rest of the card than I am the main event, which is not usually how these pay-per-views play out. But there's some really, really fun matchups on here.
I was just going to say, like, I've seen a lot of people since the original main event fell off saying that this card has gone to shit and it's not going to be any good. And that's not true. The undercard is actually one of the better undercards this year. I mean, you've got Paddy there, you've got Ponzinibbio and Lawler, Darren Till versus Duplessis. And like Joaquin Buckley versus Chris Curtis, that was on the Fight Pass prelims originally. Like, that is how solid this undercard is. But like you were saying, this should elicit some anticipation from you. But like, light heavyweight has a stigma for being just such a dry division sometimes. And Magomed Ankalaev, he's been the dark horse of the light heavyweight division for a while. And uber talented guy. Jan Blachowicz always puts on a good show as well. But like, really?
Yeah.
Like,
I said it in the chat earlier.
Is this what we have to cap off this good of a card? Because like you said, Colin, it does kind of feel like a fight night main event with a fucking title slapped onto it for whatever reason. The circumstances are very unfortunate, but yeah, it doesn't. I'm not super excited for the main event. It could turn out to be a good fight. All I'm saying is Magomed Ankalaev doesn't usually want to make me stay up till 6 a.m. So I will watch it, and I hope it's a good fight. I hope I'm wrong, but I just have a feeling the main event is going to be a little bit of a stinker.
I said in the chat earlier, and I'd be interested to hear what a lot of other people would say about this. For me, the division I get least excited about is the light heavyweight division. I don't know whether that's because since Jones has gone, it's kind of not really had we've not really had like a clear champion for a while. I mean, Yuri was the first one that everyone got really excited about, and now it's kind of we're back to not even having Yuri. Glover's going to be on the sideline now for how long as well? I don't know. It's one that I just can't get massively excited about.
Yeah, no, I feel exactly the same way about light heavyweight, especially light heavyweight main events. I'm just never convinced that it's going to be a great fight to end the night, obviously, unless it's Yuri, but he doesn't fight too often. So it does it, that's kind of like a one-off whenever he gets in there. But like we have said, the rest of the card is really, really good. So it is still a really good event. It's just a shame with the main event that it does feel a little bit anticlimactic as the kind of end of the year card that they do. Is it? I know that they are both from Liverpool, so grouping Paddy and Darren together is very obvious to do, but it does feel very much like the question around both of them is how high is their ceiling really? Obviously, Paddy, very different scenario to Darren Till, where he's kept winning and he's kind of moving up the ladder, whereas Till kind of went up and now is kind of, we're seeing where his place is at. The question, I suppose, for you guys is, which one do you think has a better chance of winning on Saturday, Paddy or Darren?
I think Paddy, purely because of the opponent. Not that I'm saying Jared Gordon isn't a very, very tough fighter, but du Plessis is he's very good. He's a tough matchup for Till. I mean, Till's obviously a more of a counter striker than he is a forward pressure fighter, so that might play into his hands because Dricus is quite a forward pressure fighter. But I think just on opponents alone, I think I'd say Paddy's got a better chance of winning, and because we've seen him more often than we've seen Till in the last couple of years.
I can't believe I'm actually about to back Darren Till here, but I'm going to play devil's advocate. And this is purely on what I remember of the du Plessis and Tavares fight from earlier this year. Du Plessis, super exciting fighter, hits very hard, very talented, could have a high ceiling in the UFC. Unfortunately, he was getting bashed around the shop by Tavares for a decent portion of that fight because he was just wading into exchanges with no defense whatsoever. And like you were saying, Jamie, like Till is a counter striker more than anything else these days. So if he can place that left hand, if he's in good shape and he's in the right mindset for this fight, there's a good path to victory for Till. I won't say there's a better one than there is for Paddy because that would just be a lie at the end of the day. But I do think that a lot of people are going to write Till off because he's been out for a while. But I actually think this matchup could play out well for him. I suppose the question around Till with this is just, how is he going to fare after being out for over a year? How much will the training camp with Chimaev have helped him? All that kind of stuff as well. And, how's his injury? Is he in good shape? We saw just up until about a week ago, he was still, carrying Christmas weight in fucking October and November. But he seems to have gotten in pretty good shape now. So I'm excited for Till. It's a bit of a risky one, but I just thought I'd play devil's advocate there because I do see a path to victory for Till. I see a lot of people writing him off, but I do think du Plessis leaves a lot exposed when he comes into exchanges.
Yeah. One thing I'd ask you both then on the tail end of that question is, if Paddy does lose, how do you see him losing? Because I think he is just better than Jared Gordon wherever the fight goes.
My worries with Paddy have always been that he's very hittable. and that he
Yeah.
is so explosive that what happens when he doesn't get the finish. Jared Gordon's an experienced guy. He's been in some tough fights in the UFC. So that would be my worry, is that if he isn't able to get him out of there in the first 2 rounds and we go deep into a third, he is very hittable. And Jared Gordon is a tough test. I don't see Paddy being finished by Jared Gordon. I think you would need someone with a bit more one-punch power, because Paddy has got a hell of a chin on him. But I could see the fight slipping away from him if he's not able to get a finish.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I think Paddy's only real concern in this fight would be gassing out. If he, puts his foot to the metal in the early rounds, trying to put Gordon out of there, because Gordon has been finished, and I think he's been finished in all 5 of his losses, 4 by knockout as well. So, do we expect Paddy maybe to keep this one on the feet for a while? I think if he goes for that and Gordon is able to withstand it, rounds, the second half of round 2 and round 3, we could see Paddy slow down a little bit. And, as you said, Gordon's very experienced, especially at the highest level. Whereas maybe Paddy hasn't had that much elite experience per se. I think Gordon, he's kind of a young vet in the business, and guys who have that much experience, they know all the tricks of the trade. They know how to win rounds, they know how to steal rounds, they know just how to fucking pin you down and keep you where they want you. And I'd say that's about it, though. I am going to favor Paddy. This matchup doesn't really tell us a whole lot about Paddy's ceiling. I know people are saying it's probably Paddy's toughest fight today, and that's true, but not by a large margin.
Yeah, I'd agree with you there. I'm going to be watching that Darren Till fight with my hands in front of my face the whole time. I'm so nervous about how that fight goes for Till, with how much I feel like is on the line for him with this one. Like, another loss against a rising contender as well would be a tough one for him.
A few moments later.
Usually I would offer it up to you guys to be like, okay, which fight do you want to talk about? Because there's some really good matchups on this card. But I feel like if I do that, one of you is definitely going to pick Bryce Mitchell versus Ilia Topuria. So we might as well just talk about that one and get it out of the way, because what an incredible matchup that is. I didn't really see it coming. I thought Bryce Mitchell would face a guy that's a lot higher ranked than him and see if he can get himself into that top 5. But instead, facing a guy who's kind of a couple of steps below him in a way, but the finishes that Ilia Topuria has put out there means that no one's complaining at that fact. So what an insane matchup.
I feel like it's a bit of a weird one for the UFC to put together at this stage. Like you said, Carl, I think Mitchell is probably a couple of steps above Topuria at the moment, just because I think we've seen him fight a higher level of opponent at this stage of their careers. So yeah, it's a bit of a weird one that they've put together. I'm not complaining, because I think it is a really, really great match. It depends if Mitchell can kind of utilize his wrestling that obviously he's going to want to try and utilize. But I think in this one, I would edge Bryce Mitchell, because I think purely on the fact that we've seen him do it against a tougher opponent than what Topuria has faced so far.
Yeah, I'd agree with you on that. The wrestling of Bryce Mitchell is so good that's going to be tough for Topuria. Like, his knockouts have been incredible, but I think Bryce Mitchell is on a one-way track to being a title contender pretty soon. Like, his performances have been so flawless. We're not going to talk about Robbie Lawler versus Santiago Ponzinibbio, because just as we were recording, we found out that the fight is off. So that's very unfortunate. I'm always happy to watch Robbie Lawler fight, whatever the opponent is. So Ponzinibbio has gone from being like an insanely dangerous striker to putting on fun fights, which I never saw him being capable of. But he's been in some absolute bangers since his return after he had all those years off. But like I said, I'll now offer up to you guys what fight and the rest of the card that we haven't spoken about is really grabbing your attention.
I'll let you go first, Jack. Oh, go on, mate. You go first, mate.
Who am I going to go? I'm going to say Chris Curtis and Joaquin Buckley. I think this is a main card worthy fight on any card. So to see this one on the prelims, a little bit disappointing that they're not getting the limelight that they deserve, but still, most people are going to be tuning in. Joaquin Buckley, he had a fight back in Paris against Nasruddin Imavov. Didn't go his way, and he didn't look tremendously out of his depth, but he didn't put on the performance that maybe some people wanted him to. You can kind of say the same about Chris Curtis. He had a fight against Jack Hermanson back in July. He stepped up on short notice to replace Darren Till, and that one didn't go his way, and he actually lost quite a lot of fans because of his post-fight reaction. And he has declared himself to be the king of bitterness afterwards. So if that's just his thing. As a matter of fact, he actually cornered Roman Dolidze over the weekend, who was fighting Jack Hermanson, simply because Hermanson beat him. Like, if that's not petty, I don't know.
I was crazy at
that. So, despite the fact that they may have come up short against some higher ranked opponents recently, they're both two awesome fighters, never in a boring fight, and I'm really looking forward to that one.
Yeah. Tough one, man. I'd probably say Quarantillo versus Hernandez, just because I think that's probably going to be a banger. But other than the ones we've spoken about, obviously, like Till, Paddy, I would probably say that one, just because I think that's got the most chance of being a fan-friendly fight where they just swing the shit out of each other.
Yeah. We should also mention as well, you have the full UFC debut of Raul Rosas Jr. We don't really, there's not really a lot we can say about this fight because we haven't seen that much of him. I watched him on the Contender Series and thought he was all right. But that's kind of the only takeaway.
By the way,
no.
I thought, isn't it Raul? I thought, is it?
Oh, it is.
His brother's Paul, isn't it?
All right. No, I swear to God, right? I thought I was the only one who made that mistake. When he was fighting at the Contender Series, I got up to see the result of the fight at like 6 a.m, and I was so fucking tired. And I've been calling him Paul ever since. And like every time I got to, I was meant to be writing a preview for the card this weekend, and for his fight, I just kept calling him Paul, and his name is Raul.
His brother fought this weekend, I think. I'm sure I saw a tweet about it.
Is that what it is? Because I
don't think his brother is called Paul, though. Maybe it's just it looks so similar, but I'm pretty sure his brother fought this weekend.
That his name's
I
not
thought
Paul.
his brother was Paul.
I've honestly thought his name was Paul the whole time.
So did I. I only saw it about a month ago, and I was like, "Who the fuck is Raul?" I thought we were looking at Paul. Paul Rosas, the fucking 17-year-old on the Contender Series. So I apologize, Raul. This is my sincerest apologies, but to us, you will forever be Paul.
Yeah. Now that I think about it, a Mexican called Paul is a little bit silly.
Yeah.
Probably should have worked that one out.
Paul.
Yeah. But there you go. That's about it for the UFC 282 card. We've now got to do Living the Dream. Obviously, Steve isn't here, so I've got him to send in his submission for this episode. So the last time we did signature moves, and kind of in the spirit of all of the news surrounding James Krause, I suppose we should probably speak about that. Do you guys have
actually? I completely forgot about that. Fuck Living the Dream. Krausegate, one of the biggest MMA stories of the last decade, and we're just about to hit the fucking outro. We need to talk about this.
Yeah, I was going to transition through it without even talking about it. Pretty big deal.
Yeah, it's just unfolding more and more like information every day. It's getting worse and worse every single day. Obviously, the latest is that any fighters that still associate with Glory MMA will be exempt from fighting in the UFC. That's quite a few fighters and quite high-level fighters as well. Obviously, we've got Brandon Moreno supposed to be fighting Figueiredo in January. What does he do now? Does he go back to? I can't remember where he was fighting before. I think it was Tijuana or something. I mean, I don't want to get it wrong, so I'm not going to try and guess. But yeah, it was. It's a really weird one because like Jake said, it's probably the biggest thing that's happened in the last decade.
Yeah, it's very strange, and like it's hard to kind of comment on what is actually going to happen because, like you said, we're finding out more every day. But yeah, the idea that it could have implications for Brandon Moreno suddenly makes it into such a big deal. I mean, it was weird. I don't know if you guys saw that Dana just didn't really speak about it when he was asked. He just kind of brushed aside the question. But I guess, it's an ongoing investigation at the end of the day, so there's not really a whole lot you can say.
this is taking place at a federal level, and we all know that Dana, he has a healthy respect for these kind of things. He doesn't really talk too much about the antitrust lawsuit that's going on, and he probably doesn't want to accidentally implicate himself in this whole thing. It is really big news, though. Not so much, I suppose. Yeah, in our little MMA sphere, it does have a pretty big knock-on effect because like you two were saying, you've got Moreno, who's got a title unification fight in the first ever quadrilogy in UFC history coming up in just a month's time, and he's not able to, if we're going by what has been said, he won't be able to fight. And I think the name of I think it was Entrum something was the name
that might be it,
the gym he was at before that. I don't know if he's going to want to switch over. He seems to be backing Krause. He posted a photo on Instagram of him and Krause saying that he was, basically on Team Krause. It's very, very weird. Like within our little MMA sphere, where we really just care about the fights most of the time, it is going to have a big effect. But I think for the mainstream, like where MMA has still been trying to break in for a while, this could be really detrimental because we're dealing with a coach who potentially fixes fights. Or, did he fix that Derek Minner fight? Did he tell him to go out and take a dive? Is it just that he's kind of, given inside information? I don't know. Do you think that he has actually fixed a fight? Did he tell Minner to go out and just throw the fight because he was injured?
No,
I don't think so. I think he's just had a lot of bearing on how the betting line has changed because of that injury.
Yeah, which in itself is in need of an investigation anyway. But we'll see what happens with that. Now, as I was saying, this week's Living the Dream is kind of in relation to that, in that James Krause, former UFC fighter turned coach. So for this one, you have to pick for your dream fighter a mentor who has to be a current fighter, who then retires and becomes a coach who will mentor your fighter. Whilst you guys are thinking, I will give you mine and Steve's. I tried to think of it as a current fighter who I think approaches MMA really well, but would also be a great coach, someone who doesn't take themselves into the situation too much and stands back. I was kind of trying to think of who could emulate James Krause in a way. So it's a little bit of an obvious answer, going with the number one pound for pound fighter in the UFC. But Alexander Volkanovski, I think, would be an absolutely incredible coach, just the way he breaks things down. Steve has linked it to his first answer on Living the Dream and gone with Lyoto Machida to help his fighter's karate background that he picked in the first episode of this, and just someone that Steve is a huge fan of. So there you go.
That is a tough one, that is.
Yeah,
that's really tough one. Yeah.
These are going to get harder when we get less obvious ones.
That's true.
That is very hard.
Yeah, it did take me some time, and then when I thought of Volkanovski, I thought that would be perfect. It also helps with him already being on Tough, so I've already seen him do it in a sense.
I'm trying to think of someone that kind of lives and breathes the fight game.
Yeah,
and that, like you said, that kind of doesn't, because obviously with coaches, you don't want someone that's like they're doing it for themselves. So obviously they're doing it for the fighter. So yeah, that's a really hard one. I think
my original choice was Dustin Poirier, but Dustin seems so like he has so much going on away from MMA. Do you know, if you know what I mean? Like, obviously he helps with it with his training partners and stuff like that. But I think if he called time on his career and you never saw him in and around an MMA event again, I wouldn't be surprised, because he seems so set up with the rest of his life. Yeah. Whereas I feel like Volkanovski will always have something to do with combat sports just because he loves it.
I would probably, because of that reason, I'll probably say Adesanya.
Yeah,
he lives and breathes MMA, and he's got a fountain of knowledge in it. It's like that's probably my pick, Adesanya.
I'm gonna say Usman, and it's not exactly this. He has stuff going on outside of MMA. Like, he was just in a fucking Marvel film. Like, it doesn't get much more mainstream than that. but the guy just knows what he's doing in terms of fighting. That's the thing. And if we're taking our previous answers into account, I have a Muay Thai fighter, and I've got fuck all good. I've got a fuck all wrestling, and there's no one better probably to teach a wrestling than Usman. And it, like, for a real life example, he helped out Ngannou with his wrestling, and now he was throwing Gan around like a fucking child, and he stuffed Stipe's takedowns and then reversed it back on him. Like, he's made Ngannou into a terrifying threat. So I'm going to take Usman, and I would like 24-hour personal training from him, because look, I don't know if it's the supplements he's on or it's the way he trains, but that guy also has his physique figured out pretty well. So I'd like to get on his dietary plan, and I'd like to see what he gets up to outside the cage as well.
I was going to say Aldo then, but then I realised he actually retired earlier this year, which is horrendous.
Yeah, I purely threw that stipulation in because I thought it would be too easy for us all to pick Khabib.
Exactly. Yeah.
It was going to be Khabib or GSP or someone like that.
Yeah. So there you go. Thank you for joining us on Verbal Money. We hope you enjoy the fights this weekend. Make sure you check out all the previews and stuff we've got going on, and we'll catch you on the next one.